What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WrestleRant Ranks, where I, Graham, Gias, and Matthews do rankings and tier lists of random shit here on the channel. And today we're talking about 7 matches at WWE Money in the Bank that you definitely forgot about. And we're not talking about past Money in the Bank ladder matches. There's been what feels like a million of those in the last 20 years, and it's been 20 years since the first ever Money in the Bank ladder match. But it's also been 15 years since the first ever Money in the Bank pay-per-view. WWE eventually took it off WrestleMania starting in 2010, gave it its own event in 2010, and there's been a lot of Money in the Bank shows. Now, I will say this. There's been a lot of great Money in the Bank shows, and a lot of great memorable matches at said shows, including CM Punk and John Cena in 2011, John Cena and AJ Styles in 2016, Roman Reigns and Edge in 2021. I talked about that last week here on the show when we ranked Roman Reigns' championship defenses, so go back and check that out. Among many other matches at Money in the Bank, including at this year's installment. But there's been also plenty of matches. If you go back and watch each installment of the event or go back and watch the best of, these are 7 matches that you will not see on there. Now, some of these matches are just quick throwaway matches, and that didn't include every, throwaway match in Money in the Bank history. But upon going back and trying to relive some of the Money in the Bank history from the past 15 years, I just could not believe that there were matches, again, not including Money in the Bank matches and not including quick cash-ins and stuff like that I couldn't even believe happened. I literally almost forgot. And I try to have a great memory when it comes to this sort of stuff. There were a lot of matches that I just could not remember. So if you like what you see here on WrestleRant Ranks, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video. All that stuff is greatly appreciated. More episodes down below in the description box. So let's get started here. And this isn't really a definitive ranking from 7 to 1. It's really just 7 matches, but I did rank them just for the fun of it. But we get going here, starting with number 7. You saw it there in the headline, Roman Reigns and Jinder Mahal, in the thumbnail photo, rather, from the 2018 Money in the Bank event. I was actually in attendance for this show, my first ever Money in the Bank show. I was very excited to attend Money in the Bank. Money in the Bank 2011, to this day, even almost 15 years later, is still one of my favorite WWE pay-per-views in history. And I was very excited to go to Money in the Bank, and not only go to Money in the Bank, but to be able to go to one in Chicago, no less. That was kind of my appeal to going, was the fact that they were doing it in the same building, albeit not in the same month, but in June, rather, of 2018. And it ended up being a solid show. But one match I honestly completely forgot even took place at that event was Roman Reigns and Jinder Mahal. This was at that weird period where Roman Reigns had just lost to Brock Lesnar, not once but twice, failing to beat him for the Universal Championship at both WrestleMania 34 and at the Greatest Royal Rumble show a couple of weeks later. And he was stuck in limbo, really with nothing to do, until he went on to face Brock again and beat Brock for the championship at SummerSlam. Now, he was involved in that great match, I think, at the Extreme Rules show the following month with Bobby Lashley, that he thankfully did lose clean, although he avenged that loss to Bobby on Raw shortly thereafter. But he was also stuck in an interim program with a, former WWE champion, mind you, but someone that really meant nothing at that point in Jinder Mahal. No disrespect to Jinder, his championship reign was fucking terrible, though, and he just was not an exciting opponent for Roman Reigns. Being in the building for this match, I can tell you, I remember this much. People either sat on their hands or attempted to start a wave. That was how boring this match was. Not even necessarily bad, but just fucking boring. Roman gained absolutely nothing from beating Jinder on the show. And this was at a point where we didn't have brand-exclusive pay-per-views anymore. This was a match that really could have just been relegated to Raw, and we could have just moved on. The fact it was even dragged out as a competitive contest was comical, considering how low on the totem pole Jinder was at that point. He was coming off like an 8-day run as United States champion. He was WWE champion less than a year earlier, but no one gave a shit about the guy. And as a result, no one gave a shit about this match. We move on to Money in the Bank 2012. Again, another overall enjoyable installment of the event. That was actually known for the 5-man Money in the Bank ladder match for the WWE Championship contract, a very fun SmackDown Money in the Bank ladder match for a World Heavyweight Championship contract. But there was this random, mediocre mid-card match on the undercard between the Primetime Players and Primo and Epico. 2 teams you might not even remember. But I was always a big Primetime Players fan. They did end up becoming, thankfully, years later, mind you, a lot later than they should have, but they did end up becoming WWE Tag Team Champions in 2015. Actually, at Money in the Bank in a quick, forgettable match with the New Day. They ended up dropping the belt right back to New Day 2 months later at SummerSlam. But in 2012, they were just spinning their wheels. Honestly, I could not even tell you what the significance of this match was, aside from just killing time. Primo and Epico were former WWE Tag Team Champions at this point. They had just dropped the belts to Kofi and I think R-Truth a couple of months earlier. I don't know if they were supposed to be baby faces here. I think the primetime players were still heels at this point. This was very random. This show also had, I'm trying to think of what else. I don't even really remember what else was on the show. I think Sheamus and Del Rio for the World Heavyweight Championship. Was the WWE? Oh, yeah, of course, the WWE title was defended between Punk and Daniel Bryan. So, again, there was some really good stuff on the show. This match, I literally have no idea why it existed aside from just killing time. And it wasn't even as if, and I did not include to my knowledge on this list, any pre-show matches. Pre-show matches I can understand being throwaway, being quick. I think Ryback had a quick squash in this show, but they were building him up for bigger things later on in the year. This match ended up serving legitimately no purpose, and it was an all-time low point for the WWE Tag Team division. You think it's bad now at some points, on Raw specifically? It was way worse in 2012. Coming in at number 5, Money in the Bank 2017, another tag team match that served legitimately no purpose, but it had slightly more storyline significance between Breezango and the Ascension. This was at a point where I actually talked about this match a couple of weeks ago here on the show. Breezango fought the Usos at Backlash in a really fun match for the then SmackDown Tag Team titles and came up short in Chicago. Fun match. Didn't really have anywhere to go after that, though. They were involved in a storyline where there was a certain team that attacked them, a mystery team. And I think it ended up being Harper and Rowan as the Bludgeon Brothers, if I'm not mistaken. But they did not do the payoff on this show. I don't think they were ready to come back yet, or whatever the reason was. It ended up being the Ascension were revealed here as the culprits. It was not actually them. But the Ascension, as you would probably imagine, by this point in 2017, they were on the main roster for almost 5 years, which is honestly kind of crazy. I liked them in NXT on the main roster. They meant absolutely nothing. But by 2017, even by early 2015, no one gave a shit about these guys. So in 2017, people were just like, why is this a fucking thing? Why are they coming out to legitimately no reaction as these supposed attackers of Breezango for a match that no one gives a shit about? This was at a point a year before Money in the Bank 2018 that WWE was doing brand exclusive pay-per-views. So they wanted to fill out these cards with random people from each shows just to fill out the 2 or 3 hours of pay-per-view time, sometimes 3 hours plus. And that's why this match really made the card. It was a filler. If you look at the other Money in the Bank pay-per-views, we have matches like Rusev and Titus O'Neil, like random-ass shit. Rusev and Big E from Money in the Bank 2014. But those matches made more sense. Again, this match, not that it didn't make sense, but it was really just a SmackDown match. And it wasn't even the blow-off to the story. It was just another chapter in introducing the ultimate attackers of Breezango, who, again, I think were the Bludgeon Brothers, but the storyline was so insignificant, I legitimately just don't remember. Coming in at number 4, Money in the Bank 2016, Sheamus and Apollo Crews. Yes, Apollo Crews not only got a pay-per-view singles match in 2016 against Sheamus, he fucking beat the guy. He actually beat Sheamus, and that was how low on the totem pole Sheamus was at this point in his career. We all love Sheamus now, and no disrespect to Apollo Crews, but Sheamus at that point was a glorified stepping stone. Not exactly his greatest hour. This was fresh off that terrible League of Nations run, where he was WWE champion for a minute. Not legitimately, but not actually for a minute, but, for a brief moment in time, he was WWE champion for like a month. And then he dropped the belt and went right back to being an afterthought. The group broke up. They utilized Sheamus before the bar became a thing that really saved Sheamus' career. They were utilizing him to get over other people, including Apollo Crews. The part that sucks is that didn't really work. Crews was a very good wrestler with just not a whole lot of charisma and character. And part of that is on WWE. Part of that is on Crews himself. He's just not this over-the-top, performer that would really excel at a main event level, or even an upper mid-card level in WWE. Although, thankfully, years later, he went on to win like the United States Championship, the Intercontinental Championship. He's had success in WWE. But in 2016, they were trying with him, and I was happy to see him beat Sheamus, and the match was good. But you would never even remember this match happened because it amounted to nothing. Sheamus really just fell off the face of the earth until the bar became around, or became a thing, came around, and a little bit later on in 2016. In Apollo Crews, they shifted him over to SmackDown starting in the draft. He had just lost this first singles match right before this in a Money in the Bank qualifier with Chris Jericho to set up this match on the show. And this was when, like, right before the brand split was brought back, like the next month, they reintroduced the rosters. In Cruise, they tried with on SmackDown. Again, didn't really go anywhere, and Sheamus actually had way more success in the bar. And it's a match that was just kind of forgotten about, despite being solid for what it was. Coming in at number 3, Money in the Bank 2023, the most recent installment, the most recent entry on this list. And this was a fine match. But again, looking back at the cards from the last 15 years of Money in the Bank, I totally forgot this was even a thing. Cody Rhodes was kind of in a similar position to Roman Reigns in 2018, where, 5 years earlier prior to this, Roman lost at Mania and was kind of stuck in limbo before SummerSlam. Now, Cody, they did not give him his rematch with Roman Reigns. It was actually, ironically, Roman Reigns who he lost to at WrestleMania 39, and it wasn't at SummerSlam where he got that rematch with Roman. That was at WrestleMania 40. So, again, in quotes, he was stuck in limbo, although they, filled the time well. But he was feuding with Brock and all this other sort of stuff. People remember the Brock matches. He beat Brock at Backlash. He lost to Brock by, I think, passing out or whatever at Night of Champions. And then they didn't have their third match at this show. They had their third match at SummerSlam. So Brock was gone for a little bit. And then in the meantime, Cody had this random-ass match on pay-per-view with Dirty Dominic Mysterio. Again, nothing technically wrong with the match. Dominic got a lot of great heat and still gets a lot of great heat. And now he's like at a point where he's beloved. Cody Rhodes, obviously super over. This was the show in London, so they played along with the crowd reactions. But again, this was a Raw match disguised as a PLE match. This really had no business being on pay-per-view. The match was perfectly fine for what it was. It gave Cody a rebound win after losing to Brock in Night of Champions. But this was really just an excuse to get Cody on the show and to have that crowd sing a song. That's really it. There was nothing else special about this match. And again, when you think back in the summer of 2023, the first thing that comes to mind, good, bad, or indifferent, is that Brock-Cody feud. It's certainly not this mini feud that he had with Dirty Dominic Mysterio heading into Money in the Bank 2023. At number 2, we go back almost a decade to Money in the Bank 2014 in Boston. This I do think was on the pre-show. I said earlier I'm not counting pre-show matches. I think this match actually was on the pre-show. Maybe it wasn't. That's how forgettable it was. The only memorable thing about this match between Damian Sandow and Adam Rose, if you can remember him, even more memorable than Adam Rose's entire career in WWE, was Sandow doing the whole the British are coming Paul Revere gimmick. I forgot what he said exactly, like how he twisted the historic expression, the historic quote. But he dressed up, as you could see in that picture, as Paul Revere because they were in Boston. And that was when he was bouncing around doing all the different characters and whatnot. He dressed up as Vince, like I think on the next night's Raw. I was at that Raw in Hartford, so that's why I remember that. He was doing a lot of different like Charlie Haas impressions that actually led him to doing Damien Mizdow later in the year that he struck gold with. But in the meantime, he was losing every match that he was involved in after unsuccessfully cashing in Money in the Bank in 2013. They were basically burying him at this point, despite the fact that he was still over to a certain degree with the audience. And that included losing to Adam Rose, who they were trying to build up for a spell there when he debuted on the main roster in the spring of 2014. I like the Adam Rose character in NXT. They repackaged him kind of out of nowhere, and I liked the repackaging from the Leo Kruger days that were kind of boring to me. But they called him up way too quickly. The crowd never really gave a shit about him long term. They were never really given a reason to give a shit about him, and beating Damian Sandow certainly did not help with that. I mean, you look at that entire fucking card at Money in the Bank 2014, they had two very good matches. The one ladder match where John Cena won the WWE World Heavyweight Championship, and the other ladder match where Seth Rollins became Money in the Bank, Mr. Money in the Bank. Two great ladder matches. The rest of that card is fucking dire. I think it had the Usos and Harper and Rowan as well. Might have been on the pre-show. That was fun. But between this, they had Big E and Rusev, which, again, like I said earlier, made sense. They were building up Rusev, and the match was fine. But they had that. I think they had maybe Naomi versus Cameron. Maybe it was Naomi and Paige. I had no recollection of that match whatsoever, so I didn't include that here. I thought this was more forgettable than that. They did that match for the Divas Championship. Fucking, what was her name? Summer Rae versus Layla, I think, for like the custody of Fandango. That is how bad the product was, even in 2014. That shit sucked. And then at number 1, Roman Reigns has actually had two very forgettable matches at Money in the Bank, and some great ones. Like, I mentioned the Edge match from 2021. He fought the Usos alongside Solo Sikoa in the Bloodline Civil War match at Money in the Bank 2023. Money in the Bank 2022, he was not in attendance for, and last year he wasn't there. But, he's been involved in 2020, he wasn't there. But in 2018 and 2019, he did compete on the show, and they were in very lackluster, what the fuck is this shit even doing on the card matches. You probably can't even see him there because my picture is kind of blocking him. That is Elias. Money in the Bank 2019, Roman Reigns faced Elias. For what reason, I still have no idea. And this was relatively recent. I mean, it wasn't last year. It was 6 years ago. But this was another show that I was also in attendance for. I was there for Roman's worst Money in the Bank ladder match, or worst Money in the Bank matches ever. He's been involved in the ladder match itself of the event, an awesome tag match with Seth in 2013, that great tag match a decade later, facing Seth for the WWE title in 2016. But the match with Jinder was fucking boring. This match should not have even existed. They booked it as a straightforward squash. I think Roman attacked Elias beforehand, which is where this picture was taken, and then he got him in the ring and beat him in like 4 or 5 seconds. What was even the point? What was even the point? Roman had just been drafted to SmackDown, which ended up turning into a historic run, and he's been on SmackDown for the most part ever since. And that was where he kind of created the Tribal Chief character and really found his footing as a heel and whatnot. But when he first got drafted to SmackDown in the spring of 2019, they put him in a program with fucking Elias, who was over, and I liked Elias, and I like Elijah, what he's doing now in TNA. But by that point in 2019, even Elias was not a top player on the show. And Roman Reigns, for whatever, they still saw main event potential in him, which he did obviously have main event potential. But as a babyface, no one gave a shit about him. He had just beaten cancer. He had just beaten leukemia. And people were still rebelling against him, even on this show. I think they thought by keeping it short and sweet, they would win the crowd back over in Roman's favor. And really just no one cared. This was a complete waste of time. Even for as short as it was a total waste of time. So those are my 7 Money in the Bank matches from the event itself, not the ladder matches that you probably completely forgot about. You could obviously do lists, ranking the best cash-ins and the best Money in the Bank ladder matches, maybe the best matches in WWE Money in the Bank pay-per-view history. I'll save those for another time, but I thought it'd be a fun, interesting trip back down memory lane of the last 15 years of the pay-per-view itself and relive some of these forgotten quote-unquote classics, forgotten gems, if you will, from the pay-per-view's history in the past decade and a half. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, and subscribe to the channel. All the support is greatly appreciated. Consider signing up for a WrestleRant All Access Pass. More installments of WrestleRant Ranks down below here on this very channel. So check those out in the description box. And we'll be back with another all-new episode next week for the final episode of WrestleRant Ranks before Money in the Bank. So we'll probably have another Money in the Bank related video, probably best cash-ins or best Money in the Bank winners. And we'll do more of a tier list, which is what we're used to doing here on the show. Until next time, folks, I'm Graham Giacomo Matthews. Happy Memorial Day. Have an awesome one, and I'll catch your ass down the road.